Hello, and welcome back to my channel. So, what do we want to talk about today? Well, I think today we can talk about some of the new innovations that my talented team and I are putting together into our platform, Boltfolio.ai. Boltfolio.ai, if you don't know yet, is the fastest and easiest way to construct a high-quality, balanced, optimized, long-term investment portfolio using the power of generative AI. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that in terms of modern portfolio theory, the objective of any portfolio manager or investor looking to deploy a modern portfolio theory strategy is to create a basket of stocks or investments, you could say, that span several different sectors and industries, which are mostly uncorrelated, meaning to say, like, you're investing in different income streams that all don't depend on one particular macroeconomic picture, right? So if you're too concentrated on one particular theme or trend, and if that trend, for whatever reason, doesn't play out the way you thought it would, then the value of your entire portfolio could be in significant jeopardy. But in terms of modern portfolio theory, what you want it to do is you want to manage your risk by spreading your investments into different areas or sectors or industries or companies within the economy, such that if any one event happens, it might affect maybe only a small portion of your overall portfolio, but not the majority. So in that way, you're building resilience. You're building kind of like robustness around your portfolio construction. It can handle impacts from multiple angles or from through different exogenous shocks, so to speak, right? Which are out of our control. As a retail investor, we can't really control how the economy will play out. Like, we don't control interest rates. We don't control, trade relations between different countries. We don't control input costs. We don't control labor costs. Like, really, the only thing we can control is whether or not we feel something is a good deal and we're willing to buy it or not. And so, in some sense, our wallet does our talking for us. Like, how we spend money kind of speaks volumes. But at the same time, we also have to be cognizant of when things are undervalued and when things are overvalued. And I think that's something that young people, or I guess I could say people who are not as sophisticated in markets and economy and business, overlook, right? They kind of just think like, well, the price is the price and that's what we pay, regardless of what we think, like that's just what it is. But in a market society, in a free market, price is determined by supply and demand. And so as consumers, we do have the ability to kind of adjust our spending and deploy our capital or our money in different areas or in different ways. And so what you want to do is you want to find companies which can, or at least a portfolio, which can do well in either times when money is tight and times when money is plentiful. The idea is you have kind of a balanced portfolio which can take advantage of either situation. Being overly concentrated or too focused on if you put all your weight on a single stock, in terms of a weighted portfolio, it can pay off for you, but it can also be very risky. So if you take kind of a modern portfolio theory approach, you're looking to create a diversified portfolio, which can be kind of resilient in the face of many different economic situations or scenarios. And I think what makes Boltfolio so interesting, to me at least personally, as an entrepreneur, is I draw upon my experience, as a youth, being very interested in the culture of collectible card games, right? These are things some popular examples could be things like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, for example. In my particular case, I like to play Magic the Gathering. I probably didn't get as good grades as I could have in high school because I was really interested in my kind of hobby playing these games. And I use the word hobby in more of a prosumer sense because I wasn't just playing it purely for fun. It was a lot of fun for sure, but I was also quite competitive. I would enter tournaments. I would invest whatever little money that I had at the time in buying cards. I would trade cards with other collectors, and I would assemble what was known as a deck. You put together a collection of cards, and you draw the cards, and you didn't know exactly what you would have, each time you turned a card over, but you had to be ready for multiple situations. So you built kind of a robust deck, or kind of a portfolio, I guess you could say, that you deployed in competition with another player. And that was a big inspiration for me growing up. I mean, it was definitely something that I thought quite a lot about. Even during class, I would be like, I remember I graduated in 2002, so that was right after the dot-com bubble burst. But during that time, schools deployed a lot of computer labs, and even libraries had computers and internet, which was a new thing. It wasn't always that the case. And I remember, like, I spent my time going to a computer lab, or going to the library, to go to websites to look up like deck construction strategies. And there'd be websites that would publish, like, if you wanted this kind of a deck, like this theme, you have like 60 cards, let's say, and like, let's say 40% of that was like, let's say, one type of card, and then the other 60% you could have like this different distribution of cards. And the max you could have of any one card was 4. And your goal was to kind of maximize your chance, no matter which card you drew, would be useful to you. And so you'd have these cards that played well together. Like, they complemented each other. They kind of provided you different like strengths. And obviously you always have to there was always a weakness that came with the strength. And so your whole goal was to build like a robust, balanced deck so that you could compete against other players who could be, deploying or employing all kinds of different strategies. And so I think that was like a big inspiration for me. It was something to where I learned how to like think about a diversified portfolio or different strategies to help insulate me against different events, to help defend me against different attacks that my opponents may deploy, and at the same time help me build towards, in a stepwise fashion, deploying my own strategy and ultimately how to win the game. And I have to say I was pretty successful at it. I've been the type of person where I've been very fortunate and lucky to have monetized my hobbies for the most part. Whether that's been sports, whether that's been video games, whether that's been collectible card games and tournaments and so forth, I've somehow been able to figure out how to actually monetize this and how to actually make it worthwhile for me from a financial standpoint. And I think some of those principles or some of those lessons I've learned along the way in my nearly 40 years on this planet, I think I can like help teach other people some of those things that I've learned along the way. So that's why Boltfolio that's one of the inspirations why Boltfolio uses this sort of card format, because whether it's collecting baseball cards or collectible cards like Magic the Gathering and so forth, or even in my career I've developed video games. So I've been working for software companies for the last 20 years, most of which have been in the sort of video game, or video game adjacent fields. So I worked for a company called Activision Blizzard, which is now part of Microsoft. For a good portion of my time, I've also worked for startups and other indie kind of independent game studios as well. And I worked for web companies and also done startups myself, and I've been able to have the good fortune to launch my own companies and raise funding and sell my products. So I have a pretty comprehensive experience in the technology landscape, which is why I always like to say, first and foremost, that I'm a technologist. I'm not necessarily a registered financial advisor yet at this point. So whatever I talk about today should not be considered financial advice. And I want to be very upfront and clear about that. I'm not suggesting anyone buy or sell any security, nor would I even I'm very cognizant of how important it is to be clear about that, right? Like, I'm not trying to pump and dump anyone. I'm not trying to, I feel very responsible for the users and for my audience. And so I simply want to share what I honestly feel is some of the best practices and lessons learned that I've picked up along the way. And I want to kind of encapsulate that or embody that within a product. And that is the goal that we're trying to achieve here with Boltfolio as the first product in our portfolio of products that our company will be developing. And I think it's really interesting because every company has a portfolio of products, if you think about it, or they manage a portfolio, whether they manage a portfolio of assets, whether they have a customer base, whether they have different products that they sell. Portfolio theory can be applied or can be found in so many different aspects of life and the economy. And so I think there are these kind of ways of thinking about putting baskets together or putting combinations together or assembling different components into the perfect mix, which I think translates across so many different areas of life. So long term, I do think that a product like Boltfolio.ai can actually benefit people beyond just stock market investing. Right? I think it can form the basis for helping people make decisions, helping people understanding like concentration risk, understanding like volatility, understanding how to bring the right, like how to put the perfect recipe together. So that's kind of like the long-term vision for Boltfolio, is that it can go beyond just stocks, right? But right now, like at the first phase or first stage of this, we're really looking to help people start investing, because that is so critical. Like if you think about it, the United States, like based on the numbers, I know that most of my audience is in the United States, although I do understand, like, and I totally love the fact that I have a global audience. Like, the United States is a place where our kind of entitlement programs are not necessarily, they're not guaranteed to be funded for the next several decades, when people my age, let's say your 20s, 30s, 40s, are expected to start drawing from their Social Security. We have an issue right now where the programs that we have in place aren't necessarily economically viable. And we've been living in this kind of, for the last, whatever it's been, 50, 60, 70 years, we've been living in this kind of, this paradigm whereby once you reach a certain retirement age, as an American, you get some kind of monthly payout or a pension, you get this Social Security that you can draw from. And this is a feature, it's one of the best features of being an American, is that upon birth, you're assigned a Social Security number. And the word Social Security is a term, but essentially it's kind of like your ID, and it is also your place, it is also your kind of right to, based on how, it is your, it's, as an American, you are relying on your government to support you, right? You pay taxes, and you are expected to receive some taxes or some benefits later on in life when you can no longer pay taxes because you're of an old age and you can't work any longer. So for however many years that you've worked, let's say you started work when you're 16 and through to the point where you're 26 or 30, you've been working for a decade plus, paying into the system as a worker, and a portion of your income is taxed, and it is drawn out from your paycheck prior to you even receiving the money. It's automatically deducted. That goes into the tax revenue of the country, and down the line, way down the line, when you become 55 or 60, now at 65, I think it may even be pushed out even to an older age. When you're no longer able to work, you can collect tax revenue. Well, I shouldn't say tax revenue, you can collect Social Security. And these programs, Social Security and disability, were set up in an age whereby we had, we were in a different phase in our development as a country. And some of the structural things around that right now don't necessarily work in today's day and age. And so there's some hard decisions or some tough choices that our leaders in government are going to have to make. And to the extent that they understand how finances and the economy works, will help determine whether or not we're going to be able to have a robust retirement system in the United States, which is extremely important because we're an aging society and every year we are losing potential income tax revenue because our population is declining. And so if you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s right now, it's actually more important than ever, especially with the rate of inflation, that you start thinking about investing for the future. And I know that some of the pushback for young people is like, well, that's so far out. I don't want to think about that. Today, it's all about YOLO, and I might not even live to be that age. But the likelihood is that you will. And every day that you say, like, I'm living for today, well, tomorrow becomes today, and did you plan for that? Like, did you help yourself? Like, I like to think about it like this. Every day there's a version of you. And so, like, the version of you tomorrow should be thanking the version of you from today. And the version of you from today should be thanking the version of you that was there yesterday. So you should be working, even if you're thinking, like, what's the point of all this? Do it for yourself. Because time goes by, days go, the calendar turns. And at some point, you need to start doing this for yourself. So putting a portion of your income or your time, your energy, thinking about your tomorrow is really important, right? So that's why I think like a platform like this is so timely, because there's this sort of one of our last few generations where we have this large enough workforce that can actually contribute to, the tax revenue that the government will use to help fund our future commitments, which in this case I'm talking about Social Security. Disability is a different thing. It's part of that. But I think as people live longer, hopefully healthier, and hopefully we've made just life in general safer. Like, you're not falling off horses, you're not, like, healthcare is much better, like, cars are safer. So I would like to think that people are not going to be needing as much disability insurance in the future. But I think with the way that inflation is going and the cost of living, this is a challenge that we need to think about. So I believe right now, I could be wrong, but I think roughly speaking, Social Security pays out like $1,500, maybe $1,700 a month. Which, if you're in today's day and age, like like that in the United States is not even enough to rent a place and have food, right? Like if that's all the money you could rely on when you're 70, you're getting $1,500, even if that number doesn't change. But imagine inflation, over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So that number remains constant, maybe slightly adjusted. But think about it, like, are you really going to be able to pay for your whole life on a monthly basis with just less than $2,000? Can you even do that now as a young person? How are we going to be able to do that as elderly, as senior citizen? So that's something we need to think about. And I think people think, sometimes they're like, well, I can't afford it. Like, I'm barely struggling to make my ends meet today. But I think you also have to ask yourself, like, can you afford not to do it? Like, not to invest? Can you afford to get old? That's a question we need to ask ourselves, because we are going to get older. And most likely we're going to live longer. I mean, the world, in many cases, because of technology and because of science and because of innovation, we're living longer, healthier lives. So that's going to put, a greater burden on our expenses as we live longer and longer in our older age. So we need to be thinking about that. We want our future selves to think to our version of ourselves today for the work that we're putting in today and how we're planning. And that's really a responsibility that we all need to think about, especially because the reality is, like, inflation is real. Like, we're aging as a society, and there's no guarantee, like, there's going to be necessarily anyone there to, like, take care of you, really, like, when you get older. So, you should be doing that for yourself. And I that's why I think, like, investing is a long-term game, and it's something you should just understand how it works and start doing it bit by bit, every day, every week, every month, and not freaking out about it, just putting in that work and putting in that effort and deploying some portion of your capital towards your future self, because you will thank your future version of your future self will thank the version of you from yesterday for the work that you're doing today. So, long-winded opening statement. If you're still with me, thank you. Let's get into the product. So what we want to share with you today is what some of the work that my talented team have put together. Now, on the front page of Boltfolio.ai, you're going to see that you are presented a search box, or we call this maybe like a form, where you can type in anything that you want in terms of looking for companies, ticker symbols, or ideas for portfolios. And that is a great way for you to start seeing what companies come up. And this gives you an idea of, well, there's a small bug here. No, just ignore that, I think, for now, because on the version you're going to use won't have this. I haven't adjusted it for split. But NVIDIA is obviously one of the foremost technology companies, as is Microsoft, Alphabet, and so forth, Apple as well. So when you use this kind of text box, I guess you could say, it will actually suggest you other prompts to follow up. So let's say you want to explore, let's say you want to look up, let's say you just have an idea, it's like energy stock portfolio, right? You just type it in here. You hit enter, or you hit the search button, and this platform is going to help you search for companies that match that search query. So I guess you could think of it kind of like Google for stocks, but for more like a portfolio. So here you're getting some portfolio stocks or some energy stocks to look at. This is not yet a portfolio, but it is a collection of stocks. And as you'll also see from the prompts, it's giving you some follow-up prompts to ask as well. So these are kind of like follow-up questions or related to your initial prompt. So we have an energy stock portfolio as our first prompt, and the follow-up prompts, recommended prompts, are things like oil and gas exploration, clean energy, for example, renewable energy, utility companies, right? Utility is a little bit different than energy stocks, right? Utilities are the companies these are your power companies. This is your, like, if you are using electricity in your home, or you're using water, you have to pay, some portion, you have to pay on a monthly basis your utility bills, light bills, the water bills, the heating bills, for example, right? These are the companies that provide those services to different areas of the country. And so these are called your utilities, and they are regulated by the government, so they have to price their services within agreed upon range, I guess you could say. But these companies tend to be pretty stable investments, and they all, for the most part, tend to offer dividends. So if you remember my episode from last week, we talked about dividend stocks. So utilities, a little bit different from energy companies, right? Energy stocks are going to be the companies that actually go and do the exploration, the production of for the most part, oil and gas, right? So whether this is natural gas, crude oil, and so forth, these companies put up the money to do the exploration. They look for oil patches or parts where they can drill. They construct rigs. They extract those resources, I guess you could say. They may transport them to refineries. The refineries then turn those raw materials into products, and those products are distributed throughout our economy. And the most common form is at the gas station, right? Cars and trucks can't deliver. We can't drive anywhere. We can't deliver products without gas in the car, right? So the energy companies do. There's a big portion of the energy sector which is dealing with end consumers that you guys may have experience with when you go to the gas station. You also have companies that do equipments and services. So they may be doing pipelines. They may be refining those crude oils into jet fuel, into other products that you have to filter that material, clean it, and produce highly concentrated versions of those that can be used for different use cases. So you can even think about this when you go to a gas station. You can see how there's different options, right? Like, I'm not sure how many people think about that, but the reason why they price those different, like gas station, you have like unleaded, unleaded plus, unleaded premium, you have like these different pricing tiers for the gasoline, is because you actually do get different mileage on that. It burns differently because of the quality of the material that you're putting in your car. I think sometimes people don't even realize that, and they just they may just not realize that there are these different levels of refinement or qualities of the fuel. Now, if you're thinking like longer term, then you might want to think renewable energies, right? Renewable energy stocks, right? So for renewable energy, this is not going to be your oil and gas. This is going to be probably things like solar energy, wind, hydro, for example. And these companies they're not as large as the big oil and gas companies. They do kind of have a challenge of the fact that the sun is not always shining all the time, every day. You have weather patterns. You have obviously the night, the sunrise, the sunset. So there's, it's just like a portfolio. You would need a portfolio of different energy to power a society. And obviously the ultimate form of energy is probably nuclear, but there's some challenges with adoption in that, and there's very few, if any, stocks you can invest into that are nuclear. Let's even check. Nuclear energy stocks. You might see something like plutonium, uranium, mining companies or enrichment companies. Some of them are, yeah, actually. So there are some companies who are investing in, nuclear energy, and some of them seem to be doing decently well. So maybe that's a trend that we'll see more of in the future. But this is just giving you an example of how you can use our new search function here, which the Talency team has put together. And we will be improving this as well so that it becomes more and more useful. We really want you to be thinking about Boltfolio.ai as your go-to place if you want to research a stock, get some ideas, create a portfolio, look for competitors, look for options around a theme. We want this to be kind of like the Google, but for putting together your own stock portfolio. Now, how do we go from just providing you, some example stocks to giving you even more detailed, even more, I would say refined recommendations? Well, that's what I want to share with you here. This is something I've been working on here on the right side. Let me just expand the window here a little bit. And one of the things that we know from, well, before we do that, let's go here. Let's say Ford, for example. When we open up Ford's company profile page, what we're doing is we're able to share with you on the bottom here this similar companies, right? This is kind of like in a lot of social media companies, you see these things like suggested friends or people to follow or topics you might enjoy, or people also bought these types of things. These are what we call algorithm-driven suggestions or recommendations, for example, right? Everything you see on a social media feed is a result of an algorithm. And how it orders that list of things, whether they're posts, images, search results, it has a ranking. And these companies, the social media companies, have very, very sophisticated, in many cases, machine learning or AI-driven recommendation systems to help either give you great suggestions that they think you would like, or to just increase your engagement, just to show you stuff that they think you'll want to see and you'll spend more time on their website. So here on Boltfolio, we also are employing these kind of technologies or techniques as well in the form of this similar company. So any ticker or any company you look at on Boltfolio's platform will present you on the section here called Similar Companies, a list of companies which are somewhat similar to the company that you are currently viewing, right? So in this case, we have Ford. What's a similar company to Ford? Well, Toyota, obviously. Stellantis, which I think used to be, Yeah, Stellantis I think is a major auto manufacturer as well. Is that Dodge? I can't really remember. And then you have GM, for example, right? So these are that's pretty good example of a few companies which are sort of similar or related to in some way to Ford Motor Company, right? Toyota, Stellantis, GM. Pretty good. I would say actually quite good. That is a great example of this sort of similar companies recommendation system. However, the challenge with this is that we are recommending these companies primarily based on this top portion of the page, which is the description of the company, some of the keywords, as well as the industry and sector that it's in, auto manufacturing, consumer discretionary, right? So if I were to look for a different company like McDonald's, let's say, I'll click McDonald's. This is the company profile page of McDonald's. What are the similar companies to a McDonald's? Well, in this case, it's saying Chipotle, Domino's, Shake Shack. Again, very valid, perfect answers, right? You've got hamburger, you've got fast food, you've got delivery. It meets pretty much the exact same market segment that McDonald's operates in the form of industry, restaurants, consumer discretionary. But what it doesn't take into consideration when we're doing this similar company search is we're not looking at the price history of the stock, and we're not looking at the financial performance. So if we just wanted to look at a company from their financial performance perspective and say, what is a company that has similar financial performance, right? The current implementation of our similar companies does not take that into consideration, right? This feed or this list, this ordered group, this ordered list of items is almost entirely driven based on the industry sector and the description, what the company does, how, what are its products, which area of the market that it occupies. We're not yet in that particular feed taking into consideration the price trend of the chart, and we're not looking at the financial performance. So as a next step, right, that's kind of a pretty standard form of similar companies, and you'll see this across a lot of different websites. How do we make our recommendation system, or I wouldn't even say recommendation because we're not necessarily recommending stocks, but from an algorithm standpoint, how do we develop an algorithm that can provide you with some information or some ideas that are still related to your initial seed idea, in this case McDonald's or Ford, but goes beyond just only looking at it from a sector or industry perspective, but also looking at it from a financial performance perspective. So what if we could do that, which I think is really interesting? So I want to share with you here a tool that I've been developing whereby I want to look at companies from a financial performance perspective. Let's say I have a group of stocks, a portfolio, or even just a grouping of stocks. In this case, we have financial stocks. We have Coinbase, we have JP Morgan Chase, we have Chubb, Hood, which is Robinhood, MasterCard, and Apollo. This is a diverse set of financial stocks. Coinbase dealing with crypto. JP Morgan is one of the biggest money center, probably the biggest money center banks in the United States, huge retail footprint. Chubb, one of the leading insurance providers. Robinhood, obviously a very popular mobile application where retail investors can buy and sell stocks and trade options. MasterCard, which is hugely popular and global payment network, and Apollo Global, which is alternative asset company. So they own a lot of different companies. They make investments. They have a portfolio of assets. So these are all financial companies, but they occupy different areas of the financial landscape, right? Each doing its own kind of thing. So let's say I have these stocks that I want to look at. Remember we were talking about a similar company or an algorithm, a feed, an algorithmically generated feed of an ordered list of companies. And we were looking at those companies from primarily a sector, industry, and keyword basis. But what if we were to look at it from a financial performance basis? So this tool takes any number of stocks that you want to look at. It uses the financial performance, so your profit, your margin, your operating income, your revenue growth. And it looks at your 4 most recent quarters of data and 4 most recent annual years of data. And it applies a proprietary weighting, which I've developed, which I'm fine-tuning right now. But it helps you to understand, what other companies have had similar kind of revenue growth, net income growth, cash flow growth, for example. So let's look at these 6 companies: Coinbase, JP Morgan Chase, Chubb, Robinhood, MasterCard, and Apollo Global. So this tool is essentially going to generate what's called a network graph. So it's going to show you all the different connections between these 6 financial stocks, essentially. And it's doing so based on their financial performance. All right, so we have it generated here. And so what you'll see is in the center here, we have, that should be, looks like that is JP Morgan. Over here you have, what is that? That looks like, I have to zoom in for a second. I'll do that in a minute. This is Apollo. and this is Chubb, and this one probably is, I can't see it yet so far. Okay, but here's the interesting thing, as there are some connections. Here's MasterCard. So we had 6, right? Apollo, MasterCard, Chubb, there's 3, JP Morgan, there's 4. I think we had Coinbase and Robinhood. So these are probably Coinbase and Robinhood down here. Yeah, okay. So we have all these different areas of the financial landscape. And as you can see there, they've clustered around the sort of performance. So in the JP Morgan example, what companies have had similar financial performance? So you're looking at the fundamentals, revenue, income, free cash flow, so forth, right? Well, for JP Morgan, similar companies are HSBC, TD Ameritrade, Santander Bank, ING, US Bank, Barclays, BBVA, UBS, right? These are your systemically important money-centered kind of banks, which is exactly what I would expect. Now let's look at Apollo Global. Apollo Global, it has an alternative asset mix of its profile in terms of what it owns. And so you're getting different financial companies. They're probably lesser known companies. Honestly, I have to look into some of into what these companies are. I think that's BlackRock. So that's very similar to Apollo in that sense. You also have some insurance companies like Travelers Insurance, Principal Financial Group, which is, I believe that is in the capital markets as well. So it has a different set of financials. Most of these are not money center banks. These are going to be things like alternative assets, for example. So that looks like that works. Let's come down here to Chubb a little bit. Chubb is actually similar to Apollo in that sense. Apollo actually, I believe, has insurance as part of one of its business lines. So that is actually very interesting that we're seeing Chubb is being closely linked in terms of similarity score to Apollo, which actually makes a lot of sense, right? And Apollo, in addition to that, we're also seeing companies like, I think this is FactSet Data Services, this is PNC Bank, this is Allstate. So you're getting these are financial companies, but they are not your money center banks. They're in financial markets, in capital markets, maybe in insurance or alternative assets, asset management, but they're not necessarily your big, money center banks like an HSBC, like a JP Morgan, and so forth, right? Funny, American Express is kind of out here in the middle because American Express is both a card network like a Visa, MasterCard, as well as a bank. So they can actually underwrite loans, or they can pass credit directly to consumers, unlike Visa and MasterCard, which don't do any of that. They're not banks. They don't have direct relationships with consumers. They're a network which kind of co-brands with other banks and merchants. But American Express is a little bit different in that sense, right? So that's very interesting. And then we also wanted to look up MasterCard. And MasterCard is, according to its sort of financials, it has a profile financially that looks similar to things like Aflac, T. Rowe Price, and other companies. So interestingly, Visa is not here from a financial performance perspective. If I were to go to MasterCard on my kind of, on this company page, I would expect to see Visa as being a similar company, just from they're doing a kind of a similar business model. A lot of the keywords would be the same. They'd be probably in the same kind of industry or sector. So I would expect to see, MasterCard and Visa to be similarly linked in that sense. But according to the financial performance, they may be performing a little bit differently. And in this case, according to the methodology that I've applied through the network graph here, I'm actually seeing that MasterCard has different financial performance than Visa. So if I go to the similar companies, as you can see from MasterCard, the most similar is Visa and Discover, which is as I would expect, right? That is exactly as I would expect. Top 2, 3, or 4 results are, in almost all cases in similar companies, the way Boltfolio.ai is currently implemented is accurate. You're going to get very, very good, highly similar from a type of business and business model perspective and sector and industry that they occupy. But if you want to go deeper and you're looking for things like, I want to see companies that have performance financially according to these metrics, then this new algorithm is going to give you even better results. So now we're at the final section here, and we're looking at Coinbase and Robinhood. And notice how Coinbase and Robinhood are so closely aligned here in this sense. Compared to the wide range of financial companies, Coinbase and Robinhood are actually quite similarly linked. That makes a lot of sense because they both deal in cryptocurrencies. They both offer kind of like trading experiences, right? Broker, dealer, or even an exchange. In the case of Coinbase, it has some similarity to something like a Charles Schwab, for example, which is doing lots of investment management for customers, right? Brokerage services. It also has some similarity to a Blackstone, which holds alternative assets, as does Robinhood. So it could be that because of the crypto exposure that both Coinbase and Robinhood have, their margin profile or their kind of profitability on holding assets is somewhat similar to a Blackstone or a KKR, for example. Coinbase also does things like, money transfers, or similar to money transfer or remittances, which is what PayPal does. So this is showing me that although it's a very early version, this ticker similarity network graph, this new way of organizing companies based on similarity, not just on keyword or not just based on their industry or sector, but also based on their financial performance, can actually make our recommendation system, which I don't mean in the sense of we are recommending stocks, but more like what are the stocks that you might want to look at to make your own assessments. This is telling me that the algorithm work that we're doing right now is actually going to be very, very valuable and useful. So let's go back here for a second and let's just look up one example. Let's go to NVIDIA. And look, there's not a lot of companies like NVIDIA. It's sort of a one of one, right? It is an outlier. We've really not seen a company like this really ever. It's quite unique in that sense. But if we really squint and we kind of give ourselves, we look, at all the companies and we try to look for companies that have somewhat similar growth rates to an NVIDIA, right? Not exactly on an absolute basis, but maybe on a micro level, right? What other companies have experienced huge growth like an NVIDIA? So we can actually look. And we'll pick up here, we see there's a bunch of different companies. The strength signal is not that great. NVIDIA does sort of stand on its own. If NVIDIA is a 100%, all these other companies are at most 6%, right? So there's not even anything that's 50% or 20% similar to NVIDIA. It's such an outlier. But if we really squint, we can look at some of these companies, and let's pull up this one. I think this is called Celsius. So we've got NVIDIA here, right? This is the latest price per share, the market cap. They have done a split, so the price per share is no longer in the thousands, it's now 130. And here's the financial performance, right? And of the similar companies, you're getting Advanced Micro and Intel. So again, the top 2 or 3 are always going to be very accurate in our current implementation. But let's say we want to go a little bit deeper, and we want to look at companies based on financial performance. So that's where Celsius was highlighted. Now, Celsius is a consumer staple. It's a beverages. It has nothing to do with semiconductors like NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. But it's being highlighted as similar. Why is that? Well, again, not necessarily on its year-to-date performance or the stock price chart, because just look at the difference in these two charts. I mean, yes, they have overall on a longer-term trend been trending upwards, but the year-to-date price for NVIDIA is 162%. The year-to-date price for Celsius is only 5.8%. So that's not necessarily what's making them similar. It's not the stock price. And it's definitely not the description or the products that they sell, because one is a energy drinks kind of company and one is a semiconductor graphics card company. But what is similar about them is this section, the financial performance. And what does that necessarily mean? Well, let's start from the annual revenue comparison. We're looking at the 4 most recent full-year annual revenues, and this is NVIDIA, and you can see that it has this kind of growth rate and this big spike up last year. And you're also seeing here Celsius, the rapid growth rate, right? Okay, that's good. The next thing we're wanting to do, now keep in mind the most recent year for NVIDIA is the lighter blue here, the teal, and darker blue is last year, whereas Celsius, darker blue is this year, right? So let's look at this year's first 2 quarters of free cash flow for NVIDIA. Big numbers, way bigger than the last year's on a year-over-year basis. And if we look at Celsius, we're also seeing the same free cash flow, huge increase this year, 2024, right? Okay, now let's look at net income. Net income in 2024 has been growing steadily over the first 2 quarters. And if we look at net income for Celsius, first quarter growth, very healthy, very strong, right? Absolute-wise, not the same. You're getting tens of billions in NVIDIA, and you're getting hundreds of millions in Celsius, so you're off by an order of magnitude, but the growth rate, the distance, the growth rate, the percentage change is high. And finally, if we look at the quarterly revenue, we can see that we have a huge step up, and we're continuing our growth rate for NVIDIA. And in terms of Celsius, we do have a healthy step up, and if things continue, then it should be growing as well. So while Celsius is most kind of similar companies from a market, industry, sector perspective, and products are Pepsi, Monster Beverage, and Coca-Cola, and as NVIDIA's similar companies are, AMD and Intel, for example, from a financial perspective, right, we are seeing that this new algorithm can help us highlight companies that are similar in a different way, right, from a performance standpoint, which is very, very exciting. So that is what I wanted to share with you guys today in terms of a breakthrough for our new product. I really encourage you to sign up, and I actually want to take this time to thank all the people who've signed up over the past couple of weeks. We just had our biggest week ever in terms of new members that we're welcoming onto our platform. So we are extremely excited by the reception and how you guys are finding this product. You're taking that step to go ahead and sign up, which is huge for us. We absolutely love that. You can use our product for free. You can even use our homepage for free. You don't even need to sign up. But by you actually taking that step, signing up, creating an account with us, you are now on that journey. And we want to thank you for taking that journey with us. And you are the people that we're thinking about when we're making new product improvements and trying to make our product better for you. So I want to thank you guys again. And for those of you who haven't yet to sign up, I highly, highly encourage you to go to Boltfolio.ai and set up an account. It takes you literally like less than a minute to do. It's just a few clicks. You have a Google account, you have a Microsoft account, you can get a Boltfolio account, right? If you want to set up your own username and do it that way as well, you can. But to make it very, very easy for you, we implemented Authenticate with Google, sign up with Microsoft account, which allows you to click a few clicks here and there. You're in. You've got an account. You can start creating portfolios, saving portfolios, using the chatbot, getting all the cool features, GPT-4o, all the cool stuff, right? All thousands and thousands of tickers on our platform. Add that to your portfolio, mix and match, come up with cool ideas. It is an awesome tool. And if you use it, by using it, you'll probably get better at investing. Like, I'm just guessing, but I would think that the more cycles you go through, the more you iterate, the more you'll improve. And so I guess you could imagine that this could easily pay for itself. You're not even spending any money with Boltfolio right now, but just the time you're investing into is time well spent, right? And I'd like to think that it could help pay off, in spades down the road for you as you start implementing your own portfolio strategies. So highly encourage you to sign up if you have not yet done so. And stay tuned with us because we are going to continue to release awesome new products, new features all the time, guys. This is a very exciting time. We've just launched our product for the first 3 weeks or so. The response has been incredible. We understand, like every time we make an improvement or an optimization, it helps our customers. So we are so focused right now on trying to make our product better. Now that we have users actually using it, we can actually learn and we can get better on that. Before, we're just kind of using our own instincts and our own experience to kind of think what we think users would like. Now that we actually have this product in the hands of users, we can learn rapidly from how they are using the tool, and this will help us make it much, much better for you guys. So between the user experience, the ease of use, signing up, making the account sign up process super easy, as well as giving you guys advanced, super cool algorithms, right, that you can actually start using in the product. We think this has a very, very bright future. We couldn't be more thrilled with how you guys responded to so far. So thank you again, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye-bye.